Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and here we're doing a segment that we call Dr. Boyce and Nomalanga, where Nomalanga Mhlauli-Moses and I talk about just things that are interesting to black people, particularly things that have to do with a life balance. And Nomalanga is here, and I want to ask Noma, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, boys. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm really well, but you know what? I was mad last week. I was really mad because I saw that there was this online fury about Miss Jamaica, who was absolutely gorgeous, incredibly talented, did an amazing job at the Miss Universe competition, right? And she was kind of snubbed, and a lot of people were upset about it. What did you think when you saw that she didn't seem to have a chance to win, even though everyone felt that she was the best candidate?
Well, it wasn't clear that she didn't stand a chance because it looked like she could actually take the crown.
Mm,
But I want to preface anything that I say with saying that I've for a couple of years now have said that we shouldn't have the expectation that these pageants are what we think they're going to be. But back to the pageant. I think, I had a short conversation with you before we went live and recorded this was held in Miami, in Doral, Miami. And to my knowledge, apparently this has a huge Hispanic population. And then the Miss Universe pageant is owned by Donald Trump and NBC. It's a partnership between the two. So the top two people were Hispanic woman, Miss Colombia, who won, and then number two was Miss USA, who obviously is affiliated with the pageant itself. Donald Trump runs both the Miss USA and the Miss Universe pageant, so there's a conflict of interest there that nobody seems to want to address.
interesting.
Miss Jamaica did stand out. She didn't look like the rest of the women. She had a nice short haircut. In one of her interviews, she did say, "I'm unique and I want to show up as I am and just represent myself without trying to be something that I'm not." And I saw her as a front runner from that moment on. She presented herself well. She was well spoken. She fumbled a little bit on one or two of the questions, but they all fumbled. And then she overall had a great presentation, and I thought that she could have won, but I somehow knew that she wasn't going to, unfortunately.
Interesting, interesting. Okay, so I think it's important for people to know why I wanted your opinion on some of this. You were formerly Mrs. Botswana. What was it, 2012? Is that right?
2011 and 12, yeah.
2011 and 12, and so you've done a lot of pageants. You kind of know how this works, and so you know the politics. And in fact, actually, if I recall, was it the Mrs. World competition where you just raised this thing? In fact, I want to revisit that for a second, and then relink that back to what happened here. Um, you actually spoke out, which is very rare. A lot of people don't see contestants actually speak out about what kind of happens behind the scenes, and so you participated and you spoke out very vocally, and a lot of people supported you. A lot of people got mad at you, but a lot of people supported you.
Yeah.
And can you tell me about that? What were you upset about?
Sure. There is always a risk when you compete in a competition, don't win, and then after the fact you say, well, something's wrong with it, because then it looks like you're disgruntled because you didn't win. So I understood that, and I'm okay with that. But however, what I did notice at the Mrs. World pageant, which was a huge pageant, there was at least 60 women from all over the world at that pageant. And the panel of judges was completely white, with the exception of one woman who was Asian. She was from Vietnam. And then the people who they selected to be in the top 12 or whatever it was reflected that. There was one woman, and you guessed it, she was from Vietnam, who was in that top 12. I can't remember what it was, top 15 or something like that. And then the rest of them were what looked like a bunch of white women, which is not surprising to me because the judges were picking who they think is beautiful, and we tend to stay close to who we are when we appreciate beauty, and that's the major problem. And the same thing happened here with the Miss Universe pageant. I saw the judges and I knew what was going to happen. I mean, it did happen. And one of the things that I said, I posted this on Facebook. I was like, at this point, I really don't want to hear any more whining and complaining about not winning coming from Caribbean women and African women. And I said that African queens, you're all beautiful, but you have to stop humiliating yourself in this way, where you parade around in front of a bunch of white judges who clearly don't understand or appreciate your beauty. And then you go home feeling like you're not as beautiful as the other women, even though you are, because they have a limited perspective about what beauty is.
Well, I think that there is a point to be made that if you think about these contests, the Miss Universe pageant, and some of these others, run by people like Donald Trump, you don't see these other women from these other countries clamoring to be judged by African people, right? They're not, just like I tell people, you don't see white kids lining up to go to HBCUs. So why are black kids lining up trying to get into predominantly white universities? That's where white supremacy affects all of us. Right? A lot of us believe in white supremacy and are devoted to it. Black people, white, etc. And I think it requires that critical examination to say, well, why is there this imbalance? Why is there not a symmetry in terms of our mutual respect for one another? And what I would say is that if a person is willing to continuously subjugate themselves, then why do you leave it up to their oppressor to rebalance the situation? Why do you leave it up to Donald Trump to decide how to be racially balanced and fair to the people in African countries, when the fact is it's up to them, it's up to us to speak up on behalf of ourselves? I mean, Donald Trump is going to represent his interests. We're not representing Donald Trump's interests. So why aren't we representing our own interests as well? And I thought that background was important because that kind of lays into your understanding of the politics of these pageants. Like when you mentioned this thing about the fact that that the pageant was held in a heavily Hispanic area, and that someone from South America was probably going to do well or win. I didn't even think about that. I didn't. And then also what you mentioned about Miss USA and the fact that an American is almost always going to end up in the top 10 because Donald Trump, an American, owns the pageant. I didn't think about that either, and it's interesting. I encourage people to go look at the history and look at the data, look at look at where Miss USA has placed in all of these pageants, and try to see if there's a pattern there. And there was another question. Oh, so I guess that goes back to the broader question. Do you think that that being a black woman, a beautiful black woman, will pretty much almost annihilate your opportunity to win at the Miss Universe pageant? I mean, when's the last time someone from an African country won Miss Universe?
The funny thing is, the last person who won was Miss Botswana, I think.
Really? What year
She
was that?
won way back in 1999. And that was the first time and the only time a black woman from the continent of Africa has ever won. And one has never won again. And one had never won before that. And that's typical. So then it kind of appeases people. It makes us feel like, well, sometimes, it is, but I'm not buying it. I honestly think that if I owned any one of those franchises, I wouldn't send contestants. I was actually happy to see that there was nobody there from my home country of Botswana. I don't think they were protesting, but they didn't send a representative, and I was very happy about that because she wouldn't have placed, she wouldn't have mattered. And a lot of African women and Caribbean women, as long as they look black, don't matter and don't count. And I think we have to stop humiliating ourselves in that way. I really think so.
Well, I'm completely on board with that. If you see the things I write about every single day, I'm a deep believer in black self-respect. And I think part of that self-respect means getting out of the habit of going to beg white people for your dignity. Stop begging them to acknowledge you. Stop begging them to take care of you. They don't. You don't need them to take care of you. You don't need them to tell you that you're beautiful and that you're wonderful and that you're brilliant the way you are. And I think that we have to get in the habit of doing that because I think it's I mean, white supremacy is such a deep infectious disease because we're born with it. I mean, we're not born with it, but it's implanted into us from the time that we're children. Even the way we measure success. If you look throughout the United States, I know that there is not a single. Sorry, not a. Let me scratch that. There are very few prominent, famous black celebrities, if you will, who didn't get their celebrity and their respect from the black community by being propped up by a white organization or a white corporation or a white movie studio or white television show, right? So what you're basically saying is that these people who are propped up, that they're going to instantly get our respect because somehow we think they've accomplished something, when in some cases all they really accomplished is obtaining favor with wealthy white people, right? I mean, and I'm not saying that in a racist way, but think about that. I mean, if you took, some of our greatest celebrities, maybe the Steve Harveys or some of the famous actors, Shonda Rhimes or someone like that, and you say, well, what if ABC never gave Shonda Rhimes a show? What if Steve Harvey didn't have the Family Feud and his daytime show and all that? How would you see him then? Now, it doesn't mean these people will be any less talented, right? But I think that they would have a lot less respect from the African American community because they haven't received this acknowledgement, this crown that's been placed on their head by institutions that are outside of our community. And that's very dangerous because
Right.
if I'm white and I'm trying to protect white supremacy, then I'm going to handpick the black people that I want to be leaders in the black community. And I think
Right.
that's just a very dangerous place to be. I'll let you
Right.
get the last word.
The key thing here, boys, is it's funny. A lot of people don't recognize this, but I think it's a key thing. The key thing here is time. All these things, like for instance, if you look at the most successful singer, they don't become the most successful singer, it seems, until they get a Grammy, right? The most successful actor doesn't become the most successful actor until they get an Oscar, or an Academy Award, whatever you want to call it. And really, it's about time. When the first Oscar was given, it wasn't that big a deal. And then it became a big deal over time. Even the businesses that we look at, and the companies that people aspire to lead and be in charge in, and the big corporations and so forth, those started as something small and then were built into something big. So I think what we don't necessarily respect for some reason is the beginning. And a lot of people, black people who are building their own thing, are more at the beginning than they are at that point of fruition where it's something big.
Well, I agree with you, and I think that I don't know if we're unique in that regard. I do know that there is data though that does say, and we talk specifically about African Americans, that we are far less likely than other groups to start our own businesses. Because we don't necessarily think in terms of developing our own legacy, because we're not able. Maybe it's a lean toward instant gratification or something like that. Like, I want the fast money from the big corporation because that is the quickest way for me to feel like I am somebody. Because I was born feeling like I'm a nobody, and I need to find a white man that's going to certify me as a human being, that's going to tell me that I'm worthy, right? So,
Wow.
at the end of the day, the problem to me is that if you're only thinking about tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, or your lifetime, you're not able to see 2 or 3 generations down the road. And I was just telling you before we talked how much admiration I had when I read the story of Brigham Young, who Brigham Young University was named after him. He's a Mormon, and it's a fascinating story because the Mormons were being treated kind of like the way black people were treated. They white people just thought they were weird and hated them and whatever, were persecuting them. So rather than seeking acceptance and validation from the masses, Brigham Young said, no, let's grab our families. We're going to go out west. We're going to go look for the Big Salt Lake, and that's where we're going to settle. So they get there to the Big Salt Lake. There's nobody there. Well, scratch that. There are no other white people there. There are Native Americans there. We know that land belonged to them long before we ever got, or not we, they got here. But we'll talk about that on a different day. But they get there and there's nobody there really to help them, that much. And there's this barren land, and so they planted some potatoes and started building houses. And they believed in cooperative economics. They supported each other, and they said, "Look, we want to be independent and self-sustaining. We're going to be strong, and we're going to build for the future." So 100 years later, not that long. I mean, literally there are people in Utah now who can say, "Oh, Brigham Young was my great-great-grandfather," right? It's not that far back. I mean, the Mormons have billions of dollars in wealth now. I mean, they are doing so well. Mitt Romney is a Mormon, and so to me, it says, look, if you hadn't had that visionary 100 or so years ago, 150 years ago, to say, let's go out west, let's build our own, let's create our own, there wouldn't be a Mitt Romney, and there wouldn't be a Salt Lake City. There wouldn't really be Brigham Young University and all these amazing things that we see out of Utah. So there might not even be a Utah Jazz, right? The basketball team. I'm being silly, but I think the point here is that that it seems to me that we need to have a nation of builders. We need to cultivate the idea of building, and building is not. It requires a spiritual transformation. It's not just economic. It's not just technical. It's spiritual. You have to reshape who you are, what your sense of purpose is, and realize your purpose is not just to get a white man to pat you on the head tomorrow. Your purpose is to develop something that will live long after you're gone. So that's my thought. I'm done talking. I know I said a lot. Did you have one more thing to say? Please feel free.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I hate to sound like a broken record, but this is one of the reasons why I really believe that marriage and family are so important. That's how we build. And even when you build a business, you want it to be there after you're gone, long gone. And that's the experience of many non-Black Americans, is that they build things and those things go on for generations. And unfortunately, we in the Black community have a different experience where our families aren't even making it from generation to generation to generation. They're breaking and falling apart before we even get to the next generation. So we're in a constant state of starting over. Just keep starting over, and trying to dig yourself out of poverty, trying to dig yourself out of a bad situation. And until we become builders, like you said, which does include building our families, building our communities, building our society, we're going to continue to struggle. That's a sad fact, but it's the truth.
Wow. Okay. Well, the lesson is simple: build, and you got to build. Don't just spend your life being propped up on someone else's building. They've built something for themselves that doesn't belong to you. If you want something that belongs to you, you got to build it. And also, the other lesson that I'm learning from talking to you today is that we are reminded that Black women are beautiful, even if no white person tells us that they are. And also, we know that it appears that these beauty pageants might be a little bit rigged, that they're a little bit biased, a little bit political, a little bit fake.
Right.
Certainly not something that I'm going to ever be able to watch with a straight face anymore. And I'm going to look for some of the things that you mentioned, in terms of what they do behind the scenes, because I think it's kind of interesting. Well, I want to say thank you so much, Nomalanga. I appreciate your time once again, as usual.
Thank you, boys.
Yes, and everybody, thank you for checking us out. I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and don't forget, we gotta build. We gotta build our own stuff. Don't be afraid. 3 generations from now, there will be some grandchild or great grandchild who's gonna look back at you and say, "Oh my gosh, my grandma had it so hard, and she overcame, and she accomplished so much, but without her, I wouldn't be who I am today." So be that person, be that grandma, be that grandfather. You can do it. Don't be afraid. Until we meet again, please take care. And God bless, and we are gone. Peace.